A monster slayer's greatest foe was not a beast, but a mirror. The ancient myth of Hercules and the Hydra is not about a swamp creature, it is a secret manual for winning the war inside your own mind. By the end of this, you will possess a complete esoteric map to identify and permanently transform your deepest, most persistent flaws. We are about to unmask the Hydra, revealing why its heads grew back twice as strong and what the golden sword and the purifying fire truly represent. This story hides a startling truth about the nature of your own thoughts and emotions. What is the one part of yourself you have been fighting yet can never seem to defeat? That primal, reactive nature is what esoteric traditions call the lower self. This is the Hydra's true identity. It is the part of you that operates on pure instinct, fear, and desire, the voice of immediate gratification and defensive anger. Think of it as the mental and emotional autopilot that kicks in when you feel threatened, insecure, or challenged. Each of the Hydra's many heads is a distinct expression of this lower self. One head might be the sharp tongue of criticism, another the coiled fear of rejection, a third the insatiable hunger for validation. They are not separate monsters, but different facets of the same chaotic inner force. The ancient mystery schools understood this perfectly. They did not see myths as simple entertainment, but as layered containers for profound psychological and spiritual truth. The story of Hercules was a secret manual, and the Hydra was its central lesson on what happens when you try to conquer your inner darkness with the same tools that darkness uses. When you attack a head of anger with more anger, what happens? It grows back, reinforced by your own emotional energy. When you try to suppress a fear through sheer willpower, it often returns in a different, more subtle form. This is the Hydra's infamous regeneration, and it explains why so many personal battles feel endlessly frustrating. This confrontation was never about annihilation, but about mastery. The goal was not to destroy a part of yourself, which is impossible, but to bring the chaotic, reactive lower self under the conscious governance of your higher awareness. The journey from being controlled by your impulses to consciously directing your energy is the very heart of the enlightenment path. So the next time you feel that familiar surge of jealousy or that old pattern of procrastination rising up, recognize it for what it is. You are not looking at a random flaw, you are staring directly into the eyes of your own personal Hydra, and the way you choose to respond next writes the next line in this ancient, internal myth. This is where the myth shifts from a simple fight into a sacred drama. Hercules is far more than a strongman. He is the archetype of the solar hero, a universal symbol for the higher self awakening to its own divine purpose. His journey, the famous 12 labors, are not random chores, but a precise map of initiatory trials, each one designed to forge a different aspect of consciousness. And the battle with the Hydra is perhaps the most critical exam on that entire syllabus. It is the test of spiritual discernment, the moment the hero learns he cannot use brute force against a problem of spiritual decay. Think of your own life not as a series of random events, but as a curriculum. Each recurring challenge, each persistent fear, each relationship that tests your patience is a labor assigned specifically to you. Hercules models the attitude of the true initiate. He does not run from these trials. He accepts them as the necessary fire that will burn away his impurities and strengthen his spiritual will. In this drama, Hercules represents that part of you capable of conscious choice, of disciplined action, and of aligning with a purpose greater than your immediate desires. He is your awakened attention, the observer who can finally see the Hydra not as an external enemy, but as a part of your own inner landscape that requires transformation. This is why the battle is so intimate and so difficult. You are not fighting a monster out there, you are attempting to bring order to the chaos within, using a consciousness that is itself still learning to wield its own tools. The hero's journey, then, becomes a perfect mirror for our own. Every time you choose patience over irritation or clarity over confusion, you are performing a micro-labor of Hercules. You are gathering the golden spiritual substance needed to forge your own unique gifts. The ultimate goal of these trials is divine harmony, a state where the lower self is not destroyed, but integrated and redirected, its raw power now fueling your highest aspirations instead of sabotaging them. So the next time you face a Hydra head in your own life, ask yourself this: what would the solar hero do? He would not meet rage with rage. He would step back, call upon his higher discernment, and reach for a different tool entirely. But why did this battle have to happen in a swamp? The myth is precise. The Hydra did not live on a mountain or in a desert. It made its home in the murky waters of the Lernine swamp. In the secret language of symbols, this setting is not a random detail, it is the entire point. Water, across countless traditions, universally represents the emotional and subconscious realms of the human mind. A clear, flowing river might symbolize intuition and feeling in its healthy state, but a swamp is water that has become stagnant. It is the dark, still pool where things settle, rot, and fester out of sight. This is the perfect metaphor for the part of our inner world we rarely dare to visit, the breeding ground of every personal Hydra head you have ever faced. The Lernine swamp is your own subconscious mind, clouded with unresolved emotions, forgotten traumas, and the silent conditioning absorbed over a lifetime. It is where every harsh word you swallowed, every fear you pretended wasn't there, and every desire you deemed unacceptable has sunk down to settle in the mud. We spend most of our lives walking carefully around the edges of this inner swamp, building roads of distraction and busyness to avoid ever having to step into its uncomfortable waters. We might sense things moving beneath the surface, a ripple of old jealousy here, a bubble of repressed anger there, but we hurry past, hoping if we ignore it long enough, it will simply go away. The myth tells us the opposite. It says that what you ignore does not vanish, it multiplies. The swamp is the only place the Hydra can thrive. This is why genuine spiritual or psychological work feels so unsettling at first. It requires us to voluntarily wade into those shadowy depths we have spent years avoiding. It asks us to stand knee-deep in the muck of our own past and look clearly at what we have hidden there. What might you find in your own learning swamp? Perhaps it is the lingering sting of a childhood humiliation that still shapes how you seek approval. Maybe it is a core belief of unworthiness that seeped in from some long-forgotten criticism. These are not mere memories, they are living, breathing influences. They are the nutrients in the water that feed specific Hydra heads, like the head of perfectionism that attacks you when you make a mistake, or the head of people-pleasing that demands you sacrifice your own needs. To confront the Hydra, Hercules had to leave the solid, sunlit ground and enter its domain. Your journey requires the same brave descent. You must be willing to look into the murky water and acknowledge what is actually there, to bring the light of your conscious awareness into the very places you have kept dark. This is not about dwelling in misery or blaming the past. It is about understanding the source of your inner turmoil so you can finally drain the swamp. Because a head severed in the clear light of day on the solid ground of understanding is a head that cannot grow back. The swamp's darkest secret was not the many heads, but the one that could not die. While the other heads thrashed and bit, they were all sustained by a single, immortal head at the center of the creature. In our psychological and spiritual battle, this is the master key. The immortal head is not another flaw like procrastination or anger. It is the core illusion, the primal wound from which all other negative patterns draw their life. It is the fundamental misconception about who and what you truly are. Most esoteric traditions point to one primary candidate for this immortal head, the deeply buried belief that you are separate from the source of life itself, whether you call that the divine, the universe, or pure consciousness. This is the original crack in the mirror, the sense of being a lonely, isolated fragment adrift in a hostile world. From this one core illusion, every other Hydra head grows. If you fundamentally believe you are separate and lacking, then a head of greed will grow to try and acquire what you think you need. A head of jealousy will sprout to compare your perceived lack to others' perceived abundance. A head of fear will coil around your heart, convinced the world is out to get you. You can spend a lifetime severing these visible heads, working on your temper or your people-pleasing, But if you never address the immortal head at the center, the belief in your own separation and smallness, the battle is endless. The heads will keep regenerating because their root cause remains untouched, feeding them with a constant stream of spiritual anxiety. This is why conventional means fail. You cannot argue with this head using logic, you cannot suppress it with willpower, and you certainly cannot kill it by attacking yourself. Force only makes it stronger, because the act of violent opposition reinforces the very sense of separation it thrives on. So what is the solution? The myth gives us a crucial clue. Hercules does not kill the immortal head, he contains it. After dealing with the other heads, he buries the immortal one under a massive rock. This is a profound shift in strategy, from destruction to neutralization, from battle to integration. In your own life, this translates to a radical change in perspective. You do not defeat the core illusion of separation by fighting it, but by realizing a deeper truth that makes the illusion powerless. This is the work of higher wisdom and direct spiritual realization. It is the moment you have a genuine experience, however fleeting, that you are not a separate drop, but an integral part of the ocean. When that realization dawns, the immortal head is not killed, but its influence is permanently contained under the weight of your own direct knowing. The feeling of lack loses its grip when you touch a state of inherent wholeness. The fear of isolation dissolves in a moment of profound connection. This is not a philosophical idea to believe in, it is a state of being to remember. Every spiritual practice, from meditation to prayer to mindful service, is ultimately a tool to help you lift that rock, to look directly at the immortal head of separation, and to see through its illusion with the light of your own true nature. So the next time you find yourself battling the same old patterns, ask a deeper question: what immortal head is feeding this? What core story of separation or lack am I still believing? For when you stop fighting the many heads and turn your attention to the one that cannot die, you are no longer just a warrior in the swamp. You are becoming the hero who holds the wisdom to end the war. Hercules must have felt a surge of triumph with that first head severed, only to watch in horror as two new ones erupted from the wound. This is the myth's brutal honesty about the nature of inner work. You can have a moment of victory, a day where you conquer your temper or break a bad habit, only to find the problem has simply shifted into something else, often more insidious than before. You stop biting your nails, but you start nervously scrolling on your phone for hours. You manage to control an outburst of anger, but it curdles into a week of silent resentment and passive aggression. This is spiritual regeneration in action, the ego's brilliant, frustrating survival mechanism. It proves that willpower and suppression are the wrong tools for this job. When you try to forcefully cut away a part of yourself you deem unacceptable, you are not resolving the energy behind it, you are merely redirecting it. The underlying force, the psychic pressure that created that head in the first place, has to go somewhere. Like water, it will find the next available crack. This is why so many self-help strategies fail in the long run. They teach you how to manage the visible head, the symptom, without ever addressing the pressure in the system. You might white-knuckle your way through a diet, but if the head you severed was emotional eating driven by a feeling of emptiness, that emptiness will still be there. It will simply find a new outlet, perhaps in obsessive exercise or a different compulsive behavior. The Hydra teaches us that the ego is not a static enemy, it is a dynamic, adaptive system. It learns from your attacks. If you fight procrastination with self-punishment, it might regenerate as perfectionism, a head that paralyzes you with the fear of starting because you might not do it flawlessly. If you battle people-pleasing by becoming abruptly harsh, you might find a head of isolation and loneliness growing in its place. The pattern is not being healed, it is being cleverly disguised. Each regeneration represents a more sophisticated defense mechanism, a deeper layer of the wound, protecting itself from the light of your awareness. This is the exhausting, circular battle so many people know intimately. You feel like you are making progress, only to be knocked back to what seems like square one, but the myth offers a critical insight here: you are never actually back at square one. Each regeneration, each new form the pattern takes, is actually revealing more information about the immortal head at the center. That new head of perfectionism is not a failure, it is a clue. It is telling you that the root cause involves a deep fear of being judged as inadequate. The head of isolation is a signal that the core wound relates to a belief that you are unworthy of connection. The regenerating heads are not proof that you are failing at your inner labor, they are the labor itself. They are showing you, in painful detail, all the ways the core illusion of separation manifests in your daily life. So the next time you see an old flower reappear in a new costume, do not despair. Get curious. Ask yourself, what is the common fuel between the old head and this new one? What underlying fear or belief is trying so desperately to survive? Because the moment you stop fighting the regeneration and start learning from it, you stop being a warrior swinging a sword in the dark. You become a detective gathering the clues that will lead you straight to the source of the entire maze. That immortal head feeds the Hydra a constant fuel, and that fuel has a terrible name, the fiery breath. Ancient storytellers did not just give the Hydra many heads, they gave it a weapon that could poison the air itself, a scorching, toxic exhalation. This is not a decorative detail, it is a precise symbol for the destructive output of our own unchecked emotions. When the Hydra within feels threatened or wounded, it does not just bite, it breathes fire. Think of the last time a wave of pure anger washed over you. It was not just a thought, was it? It was a physical heat in your chest, a pressure behind your eyes, a sensation that felt like it could burn everything in its path. That is the Hydra's breath, the psychological and spiritual poison that turns inner turmoil into outer damage. This fiery breath takes many forms. It is the searing comment you launch in an argument, meant to wound and dominate. It is the slow, toxic smoke of jealousy that clouds your perception of a friend's good fortune. It is the corrosive acid of resentment that eats away at your peace long after a conflict is over. In each case, the emotion stops being a simple feeling you experience and becomes an active force you project into your world. It poisons your inner landscape first, burning away clarity and replacing it with a smog of negative thought loops. Then it inevitably seeps out, scorching your relationships, your work, and your own sense of well-being. This breath is both a weapon of the Hydra and the clearest symptom of its active presence within you. You can often sense the Hydras stirring not by a specific thought, but by this rising heat, this emotional pressure building like steam in a kettle. The key esoteric insight here is that this fire is not a primary force, but a secondary one. The fiery breath is not the cause, it is the effect. It is the toxic waste product of the immortal head's core illusion of separation. When you believe on a deep level that you are a fragile, isolated self in a hostile universe, every challenge feels like an existential threat. That perceived threat generates a survival energy, a raw psychic fuel. If that fuel is not transformed by the higher self's awareness, it will combust spontaneously into the lower emotions of rage, fear, or hatred. It is the Hydra's way of defending its territory, the swamp of your subconscious, by setting fire to the perimeter. So when you feel that fiery breath rising, understand you are not looking at the root problem. You are looking at the smoke alarm blaring. The fire itself is deeper, fueled by an old story of lack or violation that lives in the swamp. Trying to simply stop the breath, to suppress the anger or smother the jealousy is like trying to hold a lid on a boiling pot. The pressure will only build. The heroic labor, then, is not to deny the heat, but to understand its source. Before the breath escapes and does damage, you must learn to feel its warmth as a signal, not a command. That moment of heat is your sacred pause, your chance to ask Hercules' question, what immortal head is feeding this flame? Is it the head of feeling disrespected? The head of believing you are not enough? By turning your attention toward the source of the fuel, you begin the real work of transformation. You are no longer just a victim of emotional wildfires. You are becoming the guardian who learns to tend the inner hearth, transforming raw, destructive fuel into the focused warmth of compassionate understanding. This is where the story delivers its most hopeful and practical secret. Hercules does not face the Hydra alone. His nephew Iolaus stands beside him, and at the critical moment, it is Iolaus who takes a burning torch and sears each neck stump after Hercules severs a head. This single action changes everything. It stops the regeneration. In our internal myth, this is the turning point from endless battle to lasting victory. Iolaus is far more than a helpful relative. He is the symbol of your own higher intellect, your intuitive knowing, the part of you that can observe the chaos with clarity and compassion. He is the inner guide that whispers a better way when you are lost in the heat of the fight. Think of a time you were consumed by a powerful emotion, perhaps a deep resentment. In that moment, you are Hercules, locked in struggle with the thrashing head, but then a separate part of you, a calmer, wiser voice, might have noticed the toll it was taking on you. That noticing, that moment of self-awareness, is Iolaus arriving with the torch. The flaming brand he carries is not a weapon of destruction, it is the illuminating fire of pure, non-judgmental awareness. This is the crucial esoteric key. You can have a breakthrough, you can sever an old pattern of behavior, but if you do not immediately apply the purifying light of understanding to the wound, the pattern will simply regrow. The fire represents conscious insight. When you finally understand why you react with jealousy, when you see the childhood root of your need for control, that understanding is not an intellectual fact. It is a living flame. It burns away the ignorance that fed the pattern. It seals the wound with the golden scar tissue of wisdom, so the same old energy cannot find its way back through. This partnership models the entire process of true inner alchemy. Hercules, your will and your capacity for action, does the difficult work of confronting and cutting away the visible manifestation. But without Iolaus, your discerning awareness, the labor is futile. Willpower alone is just a sword. It can cut, but it cannot heal. Awareness alone is just a torch. It can illuminate, but it cannot enact. Only when they work together in perfect synchronicity does transformation become permanent. So how do you invite Iolaus into your own battles? You create a pause between the trigger and your habitual reaction. You insert a single breath of space. In that space, you turn the torch of your attention inward. You ask with genuine curiosity, what is this feeling truly about? What old story is this head speaking for? You are not analyzing to blame, you are observing to understand. That act of conscious observation is the application of the sacred flame. It cauterizes the neural pathway of the old reaction. Each time you do this, you are not just stopping a behavior, you are rewiring your very being. You are teaching the Hydra that its old survival tactics no longer work because you have brought a new, illuminating intelligence to the swamp. This is the ultimate lesson of the partnership. You are both the warrior and the guide. You wield both the sword and the torch, and when you learn to use them together, you stop fighting a monster and begin healing a part of yourself that was always waiting for the light. The golden sword Hercules wields is the final piece of the puzzle. Crafted from the metal of the sun, it represents a will that has been refined through trial, a consciousness sharpened to a single, decisive point. This is not a club for bludgeoning your problems, it is a surgical instrument for spiritual dissection. Its golden nature tells us everything, for gold is the alchemical symbol of perfection, the base metal of our raw, chaotic desires transformed into something incorruptible and radiant. The golden sword is your capacity for discernment, the ability to see clearly in the murky light of the swamp and make a cut so clean it leaves no room for doubt to fester. Imagine you are faced with a toxic relationship or a job that drains your soul. The lower self, the Hydra, will present you with a dozen heads of fear, each one arguing for the safety of staying put. One head hisses about financial insecurity, another whispers that you do not deserve better, a third coils around your heart with pity for the other person. If you try to fight each of these fears individually with brute force, you will exhaust yourself. The golden sword operates differently. It does not argue with the heads. It sees through them. It recognizes that all these separate fears are just tentacles of one immortal head, the deep-seated illusion that you are not strong enough or worthy enough to choose a higher path. With the clarity of that recognition, you make one cut. You resign from the soul-crushing job. You set the necessary boundary in the relationship. The action is decisive not because it is harsh, but because it is rooted in a will aligned with something greater than momentary comfort. It is aligned with your own spiritual integrity. This is the solar will in action, a will that draws its power not from personal whim, but from a conscious connection to your own inner sun, your higher purpose. Every time you use this sword, you are not acting on a passing emotion, you are enacting a sacred choice. You are saying, this pattern ends here, not because I hate it, but because I see a truer way to live. The cut severs the psychic attachment to the old story. It creates the clean wound that your awareness, your Iolaus with his torch, can then immediately cauterize with understanding. This is why the sword is golden. It works in harmony with the flame. One creates the opportunity for change, the other ensures the change is permanent. So where do you find this golden sword within yourself? It is forged in the quiet moments of honest reflection. It is tempered every time you pause before reacting and ask, is this action coming from my fear or from my truth? It is sharpened each time you choose the harder right over the easier wrong, not with grim determination, but with the calm certainty of someone who knows which path leads toward the light. Your golden sword is your commitment to your own evolution. It is the part of you that can look at a Hydra head, see the immortal fear feeding it, and calmly, cleanly, choose not to feed that story any longer. That single conscious choice, repeated, is what finally drains the swamp. Just when the strategy seems clear, the myth introduces a sideways attack. As Hercules and Iolaus are locked in their synchronized labor, the goddess Hera, who harbors a grudge against the hero, sends a giant crab to scuttle from the swamp and latch onto his foot. This is not another head of the Hydra, it is something entirely different, a chaotic distraction from an unexpected angle. In the symbolic language of our inner journey, the crab represents all those ancillary challenges and petty irritations that arise the moment you commit to serious inner work. It is the phone call from a dramatic relative right in the middle of your meditation. It is the sudden, compelling urge to clean the entire house when you finally sit down to journal. It is the old friend who resurfaces to tempt you back into a comfort zone you have outgrown. The crab does not attack the core of your resolve directly, it pinches at your focus. Its goal is to break your concentration, to make you drop the torch or fumble the sword so the Hydra can regain its advantage. This detail shatters the illusion of a clean, linear, spiritual battle. Progress is never a straight march from problem to solution. It is a messy, dynamic engagement where just as you are applying the flame of awareness to one deep wound, life will often send a crab to nip at your ankle. These distractions are maddeningly effective because they are usually small, plausible, and rooted in our ordinary world. Dealing with a crab feels justified and immediate, unlike the abstract, difficult work of confronting a Hydra head. You can tell yourself, I will get back to my inner work right after I handle this one urgent thing, but the crab's purpose is to create that delay, to pull your energy back into the 1,000 petty concerns of the mundane until the sacred focus of your labor is lost. The crab symbolizes the resilience of the status quo within your own psyche and your life, the part of you comfortable with the old patterns, the lower self's entire ecosystem, does not surrender gracefully. When you stop feeding it directly, it will send proxies, these sideways attacks on your attention, to lure you back into the familiar swamp of distraction. So how do you deal with the crab? Hercules, in the midst of his life and death struggle, simply crushes it underfoot and returns to the task at hand. The lesson is not to ignore real responsibilities, but to develop the discernment to recognize a distraction for what it is and to dispatch it with swift, minimal energy. You cannot afford to wrestle with the crab the way you wrestle with the Hydra. You cannot analyze its motivations or heal its wounds. You must acknowledge its pinching presence, understand its intent to derail you, and consciously choose to set it aside. This might look like turning off notifications for an hour of deep work, or politely deferring a non-essential request, or simply noticing the craving for distraction as a sign that you are actually on the right, difficult track. Every time you recognize a crab for what it is and choose not to let it break your focus, you are strengthening the very muscles of concentration and resolve the inner work requires. You are proving to yourself that the labor is your true priority. These irritating sideways attacks, then, are not proof that you are failing. They are proof that you are succeeding well enough to provoke a response from the old guard. The crabs only come when the Hydra is truly threatened, so the next time your best laid plans for inner growth are ambushed by a chaotic day, a minor crisis, or a surge of tempting escapism, pause for just a second. Before you react, ask yourself, is this a real problem to solve, or is this a crab? Is this life asking for my genuine engagement, or is it an old pattern trying to reclaim my attention? Your ability to tell the difference and to act accordingly is what turns a frustrating interruption into a silent victory. It is the moment you stop being a passive participant in chaos and become the unwavering hero of your own story, ankle deep in the swamp, torch in hand, focused unbreakably on the source of the fire. Hercules' final act reveals the ultimate secret of this inner alchemy. With all other heads cauterized and still, he turns to the one that cannot die. He does not raise his golden sword against it, for that would only feed its immortality. Instead, he finds a massive, immovable rock, and he buries the immortal head beneath its crushing weight. This single gesture holds the key to lasting peace. The rock is not a weapon, it is a foundation. In esoteric symbolism, the rock universally represents eternal truth, cosmic law, the unshakable reality that exists beneath the shifting sands of our personal dramas. It is the fundamental principle that you are, and have always been, an inseparable part of a conscious, benevolent universe. Burying the head under this rock is a profound act of sublimation. It means using the sheer weight of a higher realization to press down upon a lower illusion until that illusion can no longer move or influence you. Think of a core belief you might carry, like I am fundamentally unlovable. You cannot kill that idea by repeating positive affirmations that feel like lies. That is just swinging a sword at it, and it will grow back. But what if you have a direct, undeniable experience of pure, unconditional love, perhaps in meditation, in nature, or in a moment of profound connection? That experience is the rock. It is heavy, real, and undeniable. When you place that experience over the old belief, the belief does not vanish. It is still there, buried. But it loses all power to dictate your actions or color your world, because it is now pinned under something vastly more substantial. The pressure of that truth neutralizes the error. This is the transmutation the mystics spoke of. The energy that once fueled your fear of rejection is not destroyed, it is trapped and transformed. Under the immense pressure of your own awakening, that same energy might gradually crystallize into a deep empathy for others who feel alone. The illusion is rendered inert, its toxic breath cut off because you have built your inner home upon the rock of a truer knowing. Your daily life becomes the practice of living on that rock. Every time a Hydra head of lack or fear tries to stir, you do not fight it on its own muddy terms. You simply remember the solid ground beneath your feet. You recall a moment you felt whole, connected, or guided. You place that memory, that feeling of truth, directly onto the stirring fear. You apply the weight. This is not positive thinking, it is reality anchoring. It is choosing again and again to build your identity on what you know at your deepest core, rather than on the old, screaming stories born in the swamp. The immortal head of separation may whisper from under the stone, but its voice becomes faint, distant, almost irrelevant compared to the living reality you now inhabit. This burial is the hero's final labor in this battle, and it is yours as well. It asks you, what is the heaviest, most undeniable truth you have ever felt? That is your rock, and what is the one ancient story that has caused you the most pain? That is the head to bury. When you learn to bring the weight of your deepest knowing to bear on your oldest wounds, you are not ending a part of yourself. You are finally giving it a proper resting place so that you, the conscious hero, are free to walk forward on solid ground, no longer a warrior, but a sovereign walking in the sun. A hero's greatest victory can sow the seeds of his deepest regret. Having buried the immortal head, Hercules stands triumphant in the drained swamp, the Hydra finally still. But the story does not end here. In a fateful decision, the hero dips the tips of his arrows into the creature's toxic blood, believing he can turn the Hydra's own poison into a weapon for future labors. This single act becomes one of the most haunting lessons in the entire myth. It warns us that even after we overcome a monumental inner flaw, we can still be poisoned by its residue. The battle may be won, but the weapons we use to fight it can remain contaminated. Those arrows represent our spiritual tools, our patterns of communication, our ways of interacting with the world that were forged in the heat of our struggle. Think of someone who has battled through a deep-seated sense of unworthiness. They may finally achieve a position of respect or success, but if they have not purified their inner landscape, the old poison can still taint their actions. Their drive for excellence, once a golden sword, might become a poisoned arrow of relentless criticism toward others who make mistakes. Their hard-won confidence might curdle into arrogance, a weapon that pushes people away. This is the Hydra's blood on the arrows, the subtle, lingering energy of the old battle, now repurposed. It is the sarcastic edge in your voice that you developed to defend yourself in a painful past, now accidentally wounding a loved one. It is the hyper-vigilance you cultivated to survive a chaotic environment, now projecting suspicion onto a benign situation. These are not the Hydra's heads themselves, they are the tools you honed in that swamp, now carrying a toxic residue you barely notice. The myth shows us the karmic consequence of this oversight. Later in his journey, Hercules accidentally wounds a wise centaur with one of these poisoned arrows. The centaur, a peaceful teacher, suffers agonizingly and dies, but not before gifting Hercules a robe soaked in his own blood, a gift that will later cause the hero unimaginable torment. This is the profound esoteric law in action. The energy you put into the world, especially energy contaminated by old battles, will inevitably return to you, often in ways you never intended. You may overcome your anger, but if you then use cold, calculated logic as a weapon to dominate others, that is a poisoned arrow, it will create relational fallout you did not foresee. You may conquer a fear of poverty, but if you then relate to money with a hoarding, anxious scarcity mindset, that energy will poison your experience of abundance. The victory is real, but the tools are tainted. So what is the purification required after the battle? It is a conscious process of cleansing your very means of engagement. After you sever a head and cauterize the wound, you must also cleanse the sword and the torch. You must examine your habits of speech, your automatic reactions, your deepest motivations, and ask a simple, ruthless question: does this action come from my healed, integrated self, or from the shadow of the monster I defeated? This requires a humility that often follows great victory. It is the hero looking at his own hands and realizing they are stained. The purification is an act of spiritual hygiene. It might look like pausing before you offer advice to ensure it is truly for the other person's benefit, not a disguised way of asserting your own hard-won superiority. It could mean examining your goals to ensure they are fueled by inspiration, not by a need to prove an old critic wrong. You are washing the Hydra's blood from your arrows, ensuring that your future actions create healing, not unintended suffering. This final step acknowledges that an inner battle is never just about you. The energy you transform within yourself radiates outward, affecting everyone you touch. To leave your tools poisoned is to risk harming the very people, the very opportunities you fought so hard to deserve. The true completion of any labor, then, is not just the defeat of the monster, but the sacred responsibility to ensure no part of that monster's essence lingers in your hands, ready to strike when you least expect it. That poisoned blood on the arrows reveals a deeper truth about the entire journey. The battle with the Hydra was never an isolated event, but a critical step in a precise, escalating curriculum for the soul. To fully grasp its meaning, we must pull back and see where it fits within the legendary sequence of the 12 labors. This order is not random mythology, it is a deliberate map of spiritual initiation, each task designed to forge a different facet of consciousness, with each victory providing the exact tool needed for the next, more difficult challenge. The Hydra is the second labor. Its placement, immediately following the first labor of the Nemean lion, is the entire key to understanding its purpose. The Nemean lion represents the initial, obvious foe every seeker must face, the untamed, roaring ego of the mortal mind. This is the part of us that demands recognition, that reacts with pride and aggression, that sees the world as a territory to be conquered. Its skin was said to be impervious to weapons, symbolizing how you cannot defeat the basic ego with ordinary means, with logic or debate. Hercules must wrestle it with his bare hands and strangle it, learning to use his own divine strength, his higher will, to subdue this brute force of personality. Conquering the lion is the essential first step, establishing inner authority and quieting the loudest voice in the room. But once that obvious, roaring ego is subdued, what remains? A deceptive silence. This is when the real, subtle work begins. With the lion's skin now worn as a cloak, a symbol of mastery over the lower mind, the hero is led directly to the swamp of Lerna. This progression is genius in its psychological accuracy. After you have managed to control your temper or your boastful pride, you often feel a sense of accomplishment. You believe the major work is done, yet in that quiet, you begin to notice the subtler murmurs, the doubts that slither in the background, the old hurts that bubble up from the deep, the patterns that seem to regrow no matter how many times you cut them down. This is the Hydra. It represents everything the lion was not. The lion was a singular, externalized threat. The Hydra is a multifaceted, internal infection. The lion was blunt force, the Hydra is toxic insinuation. By placing this labor second, the ancient mystery schools were teaching a fundamental law of inner work. You must first gain control over the obvious, outward expressions of your lower nature before you can even perceive, let alone safely engage with, its hidden, regenerating roots in the subconscious. One labor builds upon the last. The willpower and inner authority earned from wrestling the lion are the very tools that allow you to stand your ground in the Hydra's swamp. The golden sword of discernment could not be forged without first mastering the basic strength of your own spirit. Think of your own path. Your first major breakthrough might have been silencing a critical inner voice or overcoming a visible fear of public speaking, that is your Nemean lion. But then, in the aftermath, you might encounter a more complex web of issues, perhaps a tendency toward self-sabotage when success is near, or a pattern of attracting the same kind of dysfunctional relationships. These are your Hydra heads, sprouting from a swamp you did not even know existed until the lion was quiet. Seeing the labors as a sequence changes everything. It means you are not failing if, after a big victory, you face a messier, more confusing set of challenges. You are progressing. The curriculum is advancing. The initial labor of conquering the mortal mind makes you strong enough to endure the far more disorienting labor of healing the subconscious. And this second labor, with its lessons of cauterization and purification, will in turn provide the precise awareness needed for the third labor and the fourth, all the way to the final apotheosis. Your journey has a hidden architecture, a divine logic where each struggle, however painful, is preparing you for the next necessary revelation. So if you find yourself in the swamp, remember, you would not be here if you had not already slain the lion. You have already proven you possess the strength for this deeper, murkier work. The cloak of that first victory is already upon your shoulders, even when you are knee-deep in the muck, searching for the immortal head beneath the dark water. This descent into the swamp, this confrontation with the multiplying heads, is the very image of a sacred chemical reaction. For the medieval alchemists, whose true work was the transformation of the soul, the Hydra was not a monster to fear, but a necessary ingredient. They called it the prima materia, the raw, chaotic first matter from which all gold must eventually be born. This is the profound alchemical secret hidden within the myth. The entire battle is a perfect allegory for the two most important words in the alchemist's lexicon, solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate. To understand this is to see your own inner struggles not as failures, but as the essential, messy first steps of a divine crafting. The prima materia is the unrefined stuff of your own being, the tangled mess of your instincts, your inherited traits, your unprocessed emotions, and your latent potential, all mixed together in the murky waters of the subconscious. It is impure, volatile, and often ugly to look at, which is exactly why so many of us try to ignore it or pretend it isn't there. But for the alchemist, this chaotic matter was not garbage, it was the only possible starting point. You cannot make gold from thin air, you must make it from the lead you already possess. Your procrastination, your pride, your fears, these are not just flaws, they are the very lead of your personality, the prima materia waiting for the fire of your attention. The process of dissolving, is precisely what Hercules does with his golden sword. Each time he severs a head, he is not just attacking, he is performing a spiritual dissection. He is breaking down a complex, solidified pattern of behavior into its component parts. Think of a head of chronic people-pleasing. The solve stage is where you take that solid block of behavior and dissolve it, asking what fear is at the core of this. Is it a fear of abandonment? A need for validation? You are breaking the pattern apart, analyzing its elements, seeing it not as an unchangeable part of you, but as a compound that can be taken apart. This dissolution is painful and disorienting because it means losing the familiar shape of a habit, even a bad one. It feels like coming undone, but this undoing is deliberate and sacred. It is the necessary death of an old form so that a new, pure one can be born. If solve is the cutting sword, then coagula is the cauterizing torch. This is the stage of reconstitution, of bringing the dissolved elements back together, but this time in alignment with a higher principle. The fire Iolaus applies is not a weapon of destruction, it is the fire of spirit, of conscious awareness. When you have dissolved a pattern of jealousy by understanding its root in insecurity, you do not just leave that energy as a puddle of shame. You apply the heat of a new understanding. You might realize your worth is intrinsic, not comparative. That realization, that fiery insight, acts as a catalyst. It causes the raw, dissolved emotional energy to reconstitute, to coagulate into something new. The energy that once fueled jealousy now hardens into a genuine appreciation for another's success, or a determination to cultivate your own unique gifts. The base metal of your personality is being recast in a finer mold. This solve et coagula process is not a one-time event, it is the rhythmic heartbeat of all genuine inner work. You dissolve an old reaction of anger, you coagulate a new habit of pausing and breathing. You dissolve a self-image of helplessness, you coagulate an identity of resilient capability. Each head of the Hydra represents a separate batch of prima materia that must undergo this two-stage purification, and the immortal head, the core illusion, that is the final, most stubborn lump of lead, requiring the heaviest rock of truth to press upon it until it, too, submits to transformation. So when you find yourself in the midst of an internal battle, feeling dissolved and chaotic, remember the alchemist's view. You are not falling apart, you are in the solve stage. The elements of your being are being separated in the crucible of your experience, and the heat you feel, the discomfort, is the sign that the coagula is near, that a new, more golden version of you is preparing to take solid form from the ashes of the old. Look up on a clear, moonless night, and you will find them both, forever etched in the starry vault. The myth of Hercules and the Hydra did not end with the burial of the immortal head. It was projected onto the cosmos itself, immortalized as two neighboring constellations. This celestial mapping is not a coincidence. It is the final layer of the esoteric teaching, showing us that this internal battle is written into the very fabric of our reality, a drama played out on both a personal and a cosmic scale. Gaze at the Hydra constellation, and you are looking at a sprawling, serpentine line of stars, the longest constellation in the entire night sky. Its form winds across a vast expanse of darkness with no bright, central point to define it. In astrological symbolism, this is a perfect picture of the subconscious mind, that long, winding journey through the personal underworld. Its length speaks to the sheer endurance required for this inner work, the fact that you cannot rush through the swamp in a straight line. You must follow its meandering, often confusing path, confronting each head, each cluster of stars as you come to it. There is no shortcut through the Hydra, just as there is no shortcut through the process of integrating your own shadow. It is a patient, lifelong navigation of your own inner darkness, star by faint star, and there, poised above it, you find Hercules. His constellation is not the largest, but it is distinct, often depicted as a kneeling hero, club in hand, forever in the posture of overcoming. His placement in the heavens is the ultimate affirmation, the cosmic reminder that the heroic principle, the capacity for conscious choice and transformation, is always present, always positioned to engage with the sprawling challenge beneath it. This celestial relationship mirrors the internal one. Your higher self, your Hercules, is eternally present within you, kneeling in readiness to confront whatever segment of your personal Hydra is currently rising into view. But the stars offer more than just static pictures, they hint at dynamic influences. If we consider planetary rulerships, the Hydra's long, nebulous form and its connection to the murky subconscious resonate powerfully with the energy of Neptune. Neptune rules dreams, illusions, psychic fog, and the dissolution of boundaries. It is the planetary force that can cloud our perception, making the swamp of our emotions feel like an endless, confusing ocean. A Neptune-influenced Hydra head is not one of sharp anger, but of vague anxiety, of addictive escape, of losing yourself in fantasies or fears that have no clear shape. It is the head that whispers you are not meant for this world, urging a retreat into numbing comfort rather than a clear-eyed battle. Yet, the Hydra also holds a profound connection to Pluto, the planet of death, rebirth, and ruthless transformation. Pluto does not deal in fog, it deals in the underworld's volcanic fire. A Pluto-influenced Hydra head is the one connected to the immortal head of core survival fear, the head that triggers your most primal, compulsive reactions around power, control, and taboo. It is the head that regenerates from the deepest traumas, the ones buried under the heaviest rocks in your psychic swamp. Pluto's energy is the pressure that creates the diamond, or the volcano that destroys the landscape, and facing a Plutonian head requires the ultimate application of the sacred torch, a willingness to be utterly incinerated and reborn from the ashes. So what of Hercules in this planetary scheme? His constellation often aligns with the solar principle, the force of conscious identity, will, and life purpose, and with Mars, the planet of directed action and courage. The sun is your golden sword, your core sense of self that can make clean cuts. Mars is the forward thrust, the energy to actually enter the swamp and swing that sword. But without the balancing, cautionary influence of Saturn, which provides the structure and the rock, or Jupiter, which offers the faith and higher perspective, the solar martial hero can become the brute who only knows how to attack, poisoning his own arrows. The constellations, then, are a celestial map of your inner dynamics. On any given night, as planets move through these regions of the sky, they are not causing your internal battles, they are reflecting them, highlighting which archetypal energies are most active in the collective, and, by reflection, within you. A time when Neptune is prominent might be when your Hydra heads feel especially slippery and confusing. A strong Plutonian transit might signal a period where you are forced to dig up and confront your own immortal head. And when the Sun or Mars energizes the Hercules region, it is a cosmic cue to take up your tools with clarity and courage. This astrological layer transforms the myth from a simple story into a living, breathing dialogue between you and the universe. It suggests that your most personal struggles are part of a grand, archetypal rhythm. You are not just fighting a private monster in a dark corner of your mind, you are participating in a heroic drama written in the stars, with your own conscious choices determining whether you become lost in the winding length of the Hydra or stand eternal, like Hercules, in the posture of sacred victory. The constellations show us a cosmic pattern, but the real battleground is inside the human psyche. This is where the myth of Hercules finds its most powerful echo in the modern world, within the groundbreaking work of Carl Jung and his exploration of the shadow. Jung's concept of the shadow is not a monster, but it is the Hydra's direct psychological counterpart. It is the sum of all those parts of ourselves we have been taught to disown, repress, or deny because they were deemed unacceptable by our family, our culture, or our own self-image. Every head of your personal Hydra, from the sharp tongue of envy to the coiled fear of failure, is not a foreign invader. It is a piece of your own shadow that is split off and taken on a life of its own in the dark waters of your unconscious. You did not create these heads out of nothing. You created them by turning away from certain aspects of your own natural energy. Think of a child who is repeatedly shamed for expressing anger. That child learns to push the feeling down, to disown it, but the energy of that anger does not disappear. It goes underground into the swamp. Over time, it gathers force and complexity, eventually emerging as a full-blown Hydra head, perhaps as passive aggression or as a seething resentment toward anyone who seems to assert themselves freely. Jung's crucial insight was that we do not get rid of the shadow by fighting it. In fact, the more we try to annihilate these disowned parts, the more power we give them. They regenerate, just like the myth says. The goal of Jungian shadow work is not slaying, but integration. This seems to create a puzzle, then. If the goal is integration, why does Hercules seem to engage in such a violent conquest? The reconciliation lies in understanding the two-stage process of the myth as a perfect allegory for the two-stage process of integration. The act of severing the head with the golden sword is not the destruction of a part of you. It is the conscious, often difficult, act of confrontation. It is you finally saying, I see this pattern in myself, I name it. I acknowledge that this jealousy, this procrastination, this need for control belongs to me. This is the heroic labor of bringing what was unconscious into the light of conscious awareness. You are not killing the shadow, you are finally looking directly at it. But looking is only the first step. If you stop there, the pattern will simply regrow. This is where Iolaus and his torch complete the Jungian process. The application of the sacred flame is the work of integration. The fire of non-judgmental awareness does not destroy the raw energy of the shadow, it transforms it. Once you have consciously confronted your repressed anger, you can then ask, what is the pure energy behind this? Often it is a need for boundaries, or a passion for justice, or a simple desire to be heard. The fire of your attention separates the toxic, twisted form the energy has taken from the core life force itself. You then take that core life force, that raw power, and reintegrate it into your conscious personality. The energy that was once a head of destructive rage becomes a fuel for healthy assertiveness. The energy that was a head of greedy accumulation becomes a drive to build and provide sustainably. The cauterization is what makes integration permanent. It seals the wound so the energy cannot slip back into the unconscious and reform the same monstrous shape. It is alchemical, turning lead into gold within your own soul. So the next time you recognize a Hydra head rising, try this Jungian reframe: do not attack it. Thank it. It is a messenger from your shadow, an exiled part of you that is demanding to be seen and understood. Your task is not to slay the messenger, but to listen to its message, to decipher the raw, unmet need beneath its frightening appearance, and to invite that essential energy back home where it can finally serve your wholeness instead of sabotaging it. But what happens when you step from psychology into the temple? The Hydra does not remain a mere metaphor in modern occult practice. It becomes an active presence, a thought form to be engaged with directly. For today's esoteric practitioners, the learning swamp is not just a symbol, it is a ritual chamber, and the confrontation is a deliberate act of magic. Some schools of thought view the Hydra as a specific type of chaotic egregore, a psychic entity born not from ancient myth, but from the accumulated, unprocessed negativity of humanity itself. This collective Hydra is fed by every outburst of mass hatred, every wave of pervasive fear, and it lurks in the psychic atmosphere, its many heads whispering the oldest, darkest stories into the ears of the unprepared. To the occultist, this is not superstition, but a map of subtle influence, explaining why certain societal fears seem to spread like psychic wildfires, regenerating no matter how often they are publicly defeated. The personal work, then, becomes an act of both self-liberation and planetary service. By confronting and transmuting your own Hydra, you are not only draining your inner swamp, you are withdrawing your energy from feeding that vast, collective monster. The practices for this are precise and internal. One might perform a ritual invocation not to summon a monster, but to consciously call forth the archetypal energy of the Hydra from within their own subconscious. This is a dangerous, advanced operation not for the curious dabbler. It involves creating a sacred space, a symbolic version of Hercules' consecrated ground, and then using focused will and visualization to allow the forms of one's deepest flaws to rise into the mind's eye. The practitioner does not worship these forms, they observe them with the detached clarity of Iolaus holding his torch. They might ask each head to speak, to name itself, to reveal its origin story. Is this the head of inherited family shame? Is that the head born from a specific betrayal? In this controlled setting, the act of naming is the first cut of the golden sword. Another common practice is pathworking, a form of deep, guided meditation where one journeys in the imagination to the swamp's edge, meets the guardian of the waters, and descends to confront the beast. Every step of the myth is walked internally. You feel the mud underfoot, smell the stagnant air, hear the hissing before you see the heads. When the immortal head is revealed, you do not fight it, you present to it the rock of your own highest truth, the core mantra or divine name that represents your unshakable reality, and you visualize that truth pressing down upon the illusion until it is still. The goal of all this intense inner drama is alchemical dismantling. By giving your subconscious patterns a symbolic form outside of yourself, however temporarily, you gain leverage over them. You are no longer a passive victim of a mood, you are a magician conducting an experiment on the substance of your own soul. You see the Hydra not as you, but as a construct you have the power to deconstruct. This ritualized confrontation provides the sacred container where the solve et coagula process can occur with full intentionality. The energy of a severed head is not banished into the dark, it is held in the ritual cup of awareness, blessed by the torch of insight, and deliberately recast into a new purpose. Perhaps the energy of obsessive worry is reformed into the power of meticulous planning. The fuel of jealousy is alchemized into the drive for authentic self-creation. This is shadow work made visceral and potent. It treats the myth not as a story to be read, but as a living script to be performed within the theater of your own consciousness, with you playing all the parts, the hero, the helper, and even with compassionate understanding, the beast itself. Hercules was not fighting a singular monster, but an archetype as old as human fear itself. Across oceans and millennia, in cultures that never spoke to one another, the same terrifying image emerges from the deep, a many-headed serpent coiled in the waters of chaos. This is no coincidence, it is a shared dream of the human psyche, a collective recognition of the fragmented, unruly nature of existence before the light of consciousness imposes its order. The ancient Egyptians knew this beast as Apophis, the gigantic serpent of utter darkness, who each night sought to devour the sun god Ra as he sailed through the underworld. Apophis was not just a monster, but the embodiment of Isfet, the force of chaos, disorder, and non-existence that constantly threatened the divine order of Ma'at. To defeat Apophis, Ra and his defenders did not fight to kill it, for it was eternal, but to repel it, to keep the cosmic balance each and every night. This is a profound parallel. The immortal head of the Hydra that cannot be killed, only contained under the weight of a sacred rock, finds its echo in the eternal, nightly struggle to keep the sun, the symbol of consciousness, safe from the swallowing void. Travel east to the rich tapestry of Hindu and Buddhist cosmology, and you encounter the Nagas, serpentine beings of profound power who dwell in watery realms, often depicted with multiple hoods. The Nagas are complex, not purely evil, but they represent the untamed, primal forces of nature and the subconscious mind. They guard great treasures and esoteric knowledge in their underwater palaces, but they can also bring floods and chaos when angered. The hero or sage must often gain the Naga's favor, not through conquest, but through respect, wisdom, and sometimes taming, integrating their powerful energy rather than destroying it. This mirrors the alchemical goal of the Hydra battle, to transform the raw, chaotic power of the lower self into a force that serves a higher purpose. The many hoods of a Naga king are not just for show, they signify the multitude of ways these primal, subconscious forces can manifest, from creative inspiration to destructive obsession. Even the Norse myths, born in icy fjords far from the swamps of Greece, tell of Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, so vast it encircles the entire world and bites its own tail. While often depicted with a single head, its role is identical. It is the monstrous offspring of chaos, lying in the world ocean, awaiting the final battle of Ragnarok, where it will face the thunder god, Thor. It is the ever-present, encircling threat of dissolution, the chaos that surrounds the ordered world of gods and humans, waiting to rise up. From the Polynesian creator god Tangaroa, who is sometimes shown as a great serpent in the primeval waters, to the multi-headed dragons of Chinese legend guarding celestial pearls of wisdom, the pattern is unmistakable. A serpent, especially one with multiple heads, is humanity's go-to symbol for the chaotic, formless potential that exists before creation and the fragmented, reactive state of the unawakened mind. Why this specific image, water and serpent, are universal pairing? Water is the subconscious, the emotional, the unseen realm of potential. A serpent is limbless, moving with silent, undulating purpose, representing Kundalini energy, instinct, and the cunning of the untamed psyche. Put them together and add multiple heads, and you have a perfect picture of a consciousness that is not yet unified. Each head is a competing desire, a conflicting fear, a separate voice shouting its own agenda with no central command. This is the state of being ruled entirely by the lower self, where you are pulled in a dozen directions by impulses you do not understand, reacting to the world rather than consciously shaping it. The hero's quest, whether it is Hercules in the swamp, Ra in the underworld, or a bodhisattva facing the illusions of Mara, is always the same: to bring that fragmented chaos into a state of harmonious order. The hero does not run from the multi-headed serpent. They go to its home, to the very source of the chaos, and through courage and higher wisdom, they perform the sacred act of integration. They prove that consciousness is not a passive observer of this internal chaos, but the active principle that can, through relentless labor, forge a self that is whole, sovereign, and capable of facing the darkness without becoming it. So when you see these echoes in world mythology, understand you are not just looking at interesting stories. You are looking at a global diagnosis of the human condition and a universal prescription for transcendence, written in the ancient language of symbol and dream. 9 heads rise from the murk, a number that echoes through sacred traditions. While myths sometimes differ on the count, the prevalence of 9 is no accident. In the secret language of numbers, 9 holds a unique power. It is the digit of completion, the final single number before the sequence returns to 1. It signifies the end of a major cycle, the point where all lessons have been gathered, all experiences integrated, and wisdom is ready to be born. To confront a 9-headed Hydra, then, is not to battle a random assortment of flaws. It is to face the complete curriculum of your lower nature, the full spectrum of ways the unawakened self can manifest, until you have cycled through every lesson it has to teach. Think of it as a spiral where you might face a head of pride, then later a head of insecurity, then later a head of greed, each one a different facet of the same core separation. The number 9 tells us that the labor is not over until you have encountered the entire set, until you have seen the beast in all its varied, terrifying forms. This is why personal growth so often feels repetitive, like you are dealing with the same issue in slightly different clothing. You are moving through the cycle, and the Hydra is rotating its heads to show you another angle of the same fundamental imbalance. Each confrontation, if met with the torch of awareness, brings you closer to completing that particular round of the spiral, gathering the wisdom needed to finally step off the wheel. This numerology connects to a profound esoteric map, the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. This tree is depicted with 10 spheres, or sephiroth, representing the descending channels of divine energy that structure reality and consciousness. The lowest 9 of these spheres, from the crown down to the foundation, represent the entire architecture of the created universe and the human psyche in its unredeemed state. They are the realms of thought, emotion, and action before they are crowned and harmonized by the highest sephira, which represents pure divine unity. In this light, the 9-headed Hydra takes on a staggering new meaning. It is not just a few bad habits, it is the symbol of the entire psychic structure operating in a state of fragmentation and imbalance. Each head could be seen as a sephira gone wild, a divine attribute corrupted by the illusion of separation. The head of harsh judgment might be the distortion of the sephira of justice. The head of chaotic emotional need might be the shadow of the sephira of loving kindness. The Hydra is what happens when the sacred tree of your being is not rooted in the unity of the highest self, when its beautiful, powerful energies are fractured and turned against themselves in the swamp of the subconscious. The hero's task, therefore, becomes one of cosmic realignment. Severing and cauterizing each head is the process of bringing each of these 9 psychic centers back into balance, purifying their expression so they can once again transmit light instead of poison. It is the labor of rebuilding your inner tree from the roots up, ensuring every branch, every leaf, receives its sustenance from the single sun of your higher awareness. When that work is done, the 9 are no longer a hydra, they become a ladder, the very structure through which divine energy can flow into a coherent and purposeful life. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by the many-headed nature of your challenges, remember the number 9. It is not a count of your failures, but a map of your wholeness. It is showing you in painful detail every room in the mansion of your soul that awaits the light. Your labor is to walk through each one, not as a destroyer, but as a restorer, bringing the sacred fire of understanding to every corner until the entire house is illuminated, and the monster you feared is revealed to have been the blueprint for your temple all along. Even the golden sword has its limits. Hercules, the embodiment of solar will, stands waist deep in the swamp, muscles straining, as for every head he severs, 2 more erupt in its place. The myth does not shy away from this moment of near defeat, this vulnerability of the hero. It is a deliberate, crucial fracture in the story of solitary conquest. Here, the solar hero learns he cannot complete this sacred labor through the force of his own arm alone. His strength, so potent against the Nemean lion, is now the very thing that fuels the Hydra's endless regeneration. This is the esoteric lesson of humility, the moment when the seeker's proud self-reliance shatters against the complexity of their own inner darkness. You can will yourself to be patient for a day, but can you will away the deep-seated resentment that breeds impatience? You can force yourself to be generous, but can you force open a heart clenched by the fear of scarcity? The answer the myth gives is a gentle, firm no. The personal will, for all its power, is a sword. It can cut, but it cannot transmute. It can confront, but it cannot heal. For that, you need a different kind of fire, one you cannot generate through effort alone. This is why Iolaus, the nephew, the helper, is not an afterthought in the story. He is the narrative's heart. Hercules must ask for his aid, must accept that he cannot do this by himself. This request is a sacred surrender. It symbolizes the opening to divine grace, to higher guidance, or to the awakening of inner faculties that have been dormant, waiting for the ego to finally admit it is lost. Think of your own most stubborn patterns. How often have you tried to think your way out of an emotional trap, or to discipline yourself out of a spiritual malaise, only to find yourself more exhausted and entangled? That exhausting cycle is Hercules swinging his sword alone in the swamp. The moment of humility comes when you stop, breathe, and inwardly admit, I cannot fix this with the tools I have been using. I need help. This help can take many forms. It might be the sudden, intuitive insight that arises when you quiet your frantic mind, a whisper of wisdom that feels like it comes from beyond your personal thoughts. That is your inner Iolaus arriving with the torch. It might be the grace found in a moment of profound silence in nature, or the unexpected support from a friend who speaks the exact truth you needed to hear. It could be the guidance found in a prayer, a meditation, or a line of sacred text that seems to illuminate your path exactly when all your own plans have gone dark. This assistance is not a crutch for the weak, it is the necessary catalyst for the strong. It represents the universe's response to a sincere cry for clarity, the higher dimensions of your own being stepping in when the lower self has fought itself to a standstill. True spiritual victory, then, is never a solo act of conquest. It is a collaborative masterpiece between your personal effort and a grace you must be humble enough to receive. Hercules provides the focused will, the courage to stand in the swamp, but Iolaus provides the transformative fire, the insight that can only flow when the heart is open and receptive. One without the other is useless. A will without grace is just brute force, creating more problems than it solves. Grace without a will to act is a dormant potential, a torch never lifted. Their partnership models the ultimate spiritual balance, action infused with inspiration, effort married to surrender. So the next time you face a Hydra head that simply will not stay severed, pause your struggle. Lower your sword for a moment. That act in itself is a profound courage. Then, in that quiet space, ask for the torch, ask for the insight, the help, the new perspective. Be humble enough to listen for the answer, whether it comes as a feeling, a thought, or an external sign. For the final secret of the hero's journey is this: the greatest strength is found not in never needing help, but in knowing exactly when to ask for it. That moment of humility, of asking for the torch, is where the alchemy truly begins, for the very substance of the monster you are facing holds a startling secret. The Hydra's blood in the ancient stories was not merely a waste product, it was a substance of terrifying duality. Fresh from the wound, it was a lethal poison, capable of killing even a god. Yet in other strands of myth, this same blood, when properly prepared, became a source of invulnerability, like the ointment that made Achilles nearly invincible, save for his famous heel. This is not a contradiction, it is the entire point. The most dangerous elements within you, your deepest wounds and most toxic patterns, contain within themselves the exact antidote for your suffering and the raw material for your greatest strength. This is the occult principle of the poison is the cure. Think of a painful memory that still haunts you, a betrayal or a failure that feels like an open wound. In its raw, untreated state, it is pure poison. It can taint your present relationships with mistrust or paralyze your future efforts with the fear of repeating the past. You try to avoid thinking about it, to bury it deeper in the swamp. But like the Hydra's blood on Hercules' arrows, it continues to seep out and poison your world in subtle ways. This is the untransformed poison, the active head of the Hydra still thrashing. But what if you were to approach that same memory not as a victim, but as an alchemist? What if you dared to apply the sacred torch of conscious, compassionate awareness directly to that old pain? The process is not about justifying what happened or minimizing the hurt. It is about dissolving the event, the solve stage, to extract its core essence. Within that poison of betrayal might lie the pure element of a clarified boundary you needed to learn. Within the poison of failure might be the refined gold of resilience and a clearer sense of your true direction. The poison, when subjected to the fire of understanding, reveals the medicine it carries at its heart. Your greatest flaw, therefore, is often an inverted version of your greatest gift. A tendency toward obsessive focus, left unchecked, is a head of anxiety and control. But when that same intense focus is purified and directed by your higher self, it becomes the power of profound concentration, the ability to master a craft or see a project through to completion with unwavering dedication. A deep sensitivity to the emotions of others in its poisonous state manifests as a head of codependency and emotional exhaustion, taking on everyone else's pain as your own. When alchemically transformed, that very sensitivity becomes the basis for genuine empathy, intuitive healing, and the capacity to hold a safe, compassionate space for others. The poison and the potion are made of the same psychic material. One is the energy in a state of chaos, reacting from the wound. The other is that identical energy, organized and directed by consciousness. This is the ultimate goal of shadow integration. You are not cutting away parts of yourself and throwing them into the abyss. You are learning the sacred art of spiritual chemistry, of taking the toxic byproducts of your old pain and, through the careful application of your own awakened attention, distilling them into the elixirs of wisdom, compassion, and personal power. The Hydra's immortal head, the core illusion of separation, is the most potent poison in your system. It is the source of all feelings of lack, fear, and isolation. Yet, when that very sense of separation is fully confronted and buried under the rock of direct experience, what is left? The profound, unshakable knowing of your connection to something greater. The poison of loneliness becomes the potion of serene self-sufficiency and universal kinship. So look at the hedge you are facing right now. Do not just see the poison. Ask the alchemist's question: what priceless medicine is hidden within this darkness, waiting for my torch to release it? Your own swamp has a unique geography, mapped by the fears you revisit and the patterns you can't seem to escape. So let's pause the story for a moment and turn the lens inward. What does your personal Hydra actually look like, not as a philosophical idea, but as a living presence in your Monday morning anxiety, your Thursday night scrolling, or that familiar tension in a recurring argument? The first step in any heroic labor is reconnaissance, to see the enemy clearly. This is not an exercise in self-judgment, it is an act of sacred cartography. You are Hercules at the edge of the learning swamp, not to fight yet, but to observe what rises from the waters. Start by listening for the hiss. Your Hydra's heads are not silent, they have a voice, a specific script they repeat. It might be the voice of the inner critic that narrates your day, whispering you are not qualified, you will be found out, or why even try? That is a head. It might be the voice of the pleaser, constantly calculating what others need from you and erasing your own desires in the process. That is another head. Perhaps it is the voice of the catastrophizer, which takes a single setback and spins it into a prophecy of total ruin. Each of these voices is a distinct head speaking for a specific wound. Now feel for the heat. Recall the last time you had a strong, reactive emotion that felt disproportionate to the event, that surge of white-hot jealousy when a colleague succeeded, or the cold dread that froze you from taking a needed risk. That emotional fire is the Hydra's breath, and it points directly to the head that breathed it. The jealousy might be the head of comparison, fueled by a deep-seated story of not being enough. The freeze response might be the head of perfectionism, terrified of making a wrong move. These reactions are not random, they are the signatures of your personal beast. Finally, trace the regeneration. Look at a habit you have tried to break, a resolution you have set and reset. Maybe you conquer procrastination for a week, only to find yourself lost in a new form of avoidance, like obsessive planning that never leads to action. That shift from procrastination to perfectionism is not a failure, it is the Hydra doing what it does best, regenerating. It shows you that the two heads are connected, likely fed by the same immortal fear of being judged as inadequate. Your task right now is simply to name them, write them down if it helps: the head of relentless self-criticism, the head of financial anxiety, the head of resentment. The head of numbing escape. Do this without shame, as a scientist would label specimens. You are not your Hydra, you are the observer finally cataloging the wildlife in your own inner ecosystem. This naming is the first application of the golden sword, a clean cut of discernment that separates you from the chaos. It says, this is not all of me, this is a pattern that lives within me. And in that simple, brave act of naming, you have already changed the game. You are no longer lost in the swamp, you are standing at its edge, map in hand, beginning to understand the terrain of your most sacred battle. Mapping the swamp is only the prelude to the real work. Now you must learn to wield the torch, to apply that cauterizing fire of awareness so the severed pattern cannot return. This is the sacred craft of integration, where insight becomes permanent change. So how do you, in the messy reality of daily life, become both Hercules and Iolaus, wielding sword and flame as one? The first and most accessible technique is the simplest and the most difficult: mindfulness. This is not about achieving a blank mind, but about cultivating the inner Iolaus, that non-judgmental witness who can hold the torch steady. When a Hydra head rears up, say a surge of impatience in a long line, Your habitual self is Hercules about to swing the sword of a sharp remark. Mindfulness creates the crucial pause. In that pause, you feel the heat of the impatience, the tension in your body, the story in your mind about wasted time, but instead of reacting to it or suppressing it, you simply observe it. You note impatience is here. This act of noticing is the first spark of the sacred flame. You are applying the fire of present moment awareness directly to the raw, reactive energy. You are not fighting the head, you are illuminating it. Over time, this consistent application of mindful attention begins to dissolve the automatic power of the pattern. The neck is cauterized not by force, but by the gentle, persistent light of your own conscious presence. Journaling then becomes your alchemical furnace, the place where you perform the solve et coagula process with ink and intention. After a mindful pause, sit with your journal and let the head speak. Write from the voice of the jealousy, the fear, the resentment. Do not censor it. Let it rant and rave on the page. This is the solve stage, dissolving the solid head into its component words and emotions. Then shift, become Iolaus with the pen. Ask the emotion questions. What are you really protecting me from? When did you first learn to behave this way? What do you need that you are not getting? The answers that arise often point straight to the immortal head, the core story of lack or threat. Finally, write a new narrative from your higher self, draft a compassionate response to that wounded part. This written dialogue is the coagula, the reconstitution. You are using the fire of your focused attention to forge a new relationship with that inner fragment, integrating its energy back into your wholeness. For those who resonate with symbolic action, ritual provides a powerful container for this transformation. A ritual is a physical story you tell your subconscious. You might write the name of a Hydra head on a piece of paper, sit before a candle flame, your representation of the purifying torch. Speak aloud your understanding of this pattern, its roots, and your intention to release its hold. Then safely burn the paper, watching as the physical form dissolves into light and ash. As you do, visualize the psychic structure of that habit dissolving in the same way, its energy transformed and released. The ritual seals the internal process with a physical gesture, satisfying the deep parts of your mind that learn through symbol and ceremony. To clear the lingering residue, the stagnant emotional energy left in the swamp, consider simple energy work. This can be as straightforward as a body scan meditation. After confronting a difficult emotion, lie down and bring your awareness slowly from your feet to your head. Where do you feel tight, heavy, or numb? Often, a head of anxiety leaves a cold knot in the stomach, while repressed anger might create tension in the shoulders. Breathe into those spaces, imagining your breath as a warm, golden light, the very essence of the cauterizing flame. Visualize it loosening the knot, dissolving the heaviness, clearing the stagnant charge. You are not just thinking about change, you are directing the very substance of your awareness to cleanse the psychic body where the pattern was stored. Underlying all these techniques is the essential cultivation of Iolaus himself, your inner guide. This might be developed through regular meditation, sitting quietly each day just to observe the flow of thoughts and feelings without attachment. It is in this consistent practice that the witness gains strength. Alternatively, for those with a theistic or spiritual bent, Iolaus can be understood as your connection to a higher guide, divine intelligence, or your own soul. Prayer or heartfelt invocation becomes the act of asking for the torch, of requesting the illuminating grace that sees what your personal will cannot. Whether you see this helper as a facet of your own mind or a benevolent external force, the function is the same: to provide the purifying flame that your heroic effort alone cannot generate. The true practice is in the synthesis. You mindfully notice the critic's voice. You journal to discover it stems from a childhood fear of disapproval. You perform a small ritual to release that old contract. You use breath to clear the anxious tightness in your chest. And throughout, you hold the attitude of Iolaus, the compassionate witness, ensuring the work is done with love, not with the same harshness you are trying to heal. This is how a head is truly cauterized, not just cut away, but met with such complete and skillful awareness that it has no choice but to transform its energy, finally coming home to serve the whole of who you are. The swamp is drained, the rock is in place, and a profound silence settles over the landscape of your mind. This is not the silence of absence, but of integration. You can still feel the weight of that buried, immortal head beneath your feet, a subtle pressure reminding you of the old terrain, but it no longer moves. Life after this burial is not a state of flawless perfection where negative thoughts never arise. It is something far more interesting and sustainable, a state of profound inner sovereignty. You have not erased the core illusion, you have simply learned its language so well that its whispers no longer sound like commands. The old story of separation, of lack, of fundamental unworthiness, is still there as a memory, a fossilized pattern in the psychic bedrock. But you now live in a house built upon the rock that covers it, and the foundation does not shake. Imagine walking through your day with the deep, cellular understanding that the thought "I am alone" is just a ghost of an old song, not a fact of your present reality. The melody might still play faintly in the background during a moment of stress or transition, but you no longer sing along. You hear it, acknowledge its familiar tune, and then you feel the solid floor beneath you, the tangible connection of breath, of life, a presence that is your actual experience. This is the peace of the sage, not because they have banished all darkness, but because they have made friends with the night and learned to navigate by the stars. Your reactions become responses. Where once a criticism would have triggered a Hydra head of defensive rage or crumbling shame, now you feel the old neural pathway light up, a faint echo of the heat, but it meets the immense weight of your knowing. You might feel a flicker, but it cannot build into a fire because there is no dry tinder of belief left to fuel it. You can then choose, from a place of calm center, how to act. Perhaps you listen for the kernel of truth in the feedback, or you calmly disagree without needing to dismantle the other person. The drama is gone because the immortal head that thrived on conflict and validation is no longer in charge. The lair itself is transformed. The swamp of your subconscious is not a seething pit of hidden monsters anymore. It is more like a tranquil garden with a sealed well at its center. Old emotions may bubble up, memories may surface, but they do so in a space that is now held, illuminated, and integrated. They are processed with the gentle curiosity of Iolaus, rather than met with the frantic sword of Hercules. You can look at a feeling of jealousy without becoming it, observe a pang of fear without being consumed by its story. The energy that once built fortresses of defense now flows into channels of creation and connection. This is the ultimate freedom, not freedom from experience, but freedom within it. You are no longer a prisoner reacting to the hauntings of your own past. You are the caretaker of a sacred ground, walking softly over the buried past, tending to the life that grows in the rich soil above it. The weight of the rock is not a burden, it is your stability, and every step you take upon it is a quiet confirmation that the war is over, and the work of building a life of authentic peace has truly begun. From a simple monster story to a complete map of the inner world, we have walked the swamp and felt the weight of the rock. This myth was never just about a hero in the past, it is a living mirror for the heroism required in your present moment. The Hydra's many heads live in the shadows of your own mind, but the golden sword of your discernment and the sacred torch of your awareness are already in your hands. True spiritual growth is not a destination where negative thoughts cease to exist. That is an impossible and exhausting goal. It is the mastery of a process, the sacred skill of catching those thoughts before they multiply, and meeting them with light so clear and compassionate that they lose their power to regenerate. This is the daily, moment-to-moment labor of a conscious life. It is the pause before the reactive comment, the breath taken when old fear arises, the gentle question asked of a rising jealousy. You are not failing when a head appears, you are being given another chance to practice the alchemy, to turn the base metal of reaction into the gold of conscious response. So now the map is yours, the tools are yours. The only question that remains is an invitation, not a command. Which head of your personal Hydra will you choose to meet first with this new understanding? Will it be the critic, the procrastinator, the people pleaser? Name it in the comments below, for in naming it to others, you bring it further into the light. If this journey into the hidden layers of myth has illuminated your own path, consider subscribing. We explore these ancient stories not as dusty relics, but as living keys to understanding ourselves and the hidden architecture of reality. Thank you for walking this swamp with me. Until our next exploration, tend to your inner flame, and remember, the greatest battles are always fought in the service of your deepest peace.